Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Today we are taking on what might be the single most critical yet often invisible challenge for the future of commercial aviation.
BVLOS.
Beyond visual line of sight operations. Here's the core reality of it, right? When your multi-million-dollar aircraft is flying miles away, safety isn't guaranteed by avoiding failure. It's proven by how ruthlessly you learn from all the close calls. You don't have eyes on the aircraft anymore.
You only have data. And, that single observation, it really defines the entire regulatory shift we're seeing.
Right.
Our sources today, they all revolve around this coming operational mandate. The FAA's proposed Part 108 framework, specifically that Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, the NPRM, from around August 2025. And it doesn't just, ask for safety. It demands this wholesale shift to a data-first safety management system culture, an SMS culture.
So our mission today is to really unpack that stack. All this complex reporting, the record keeping, the SMS requirements. We need to pull out the operational muscle that any BVLOS enterprise needs to actually succeed. How exactly do you take these tiny, invisible signals buried deep in telemetry logs and transform them into major system fixes before a catastrophic failure ever happens?
And that's the core question we have to master today. What does it actually mean for an operator to evolve from, visually spotting an accident to having to infer a near miss purely from data logs? It means mastering the identification of precursors, those weak early warning signs.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should probably start where every operator has to, with the rules themselves. This regulatory reporting structure for these higher risk BVLOS ops, it's moving so fast from being like a nice to have checklist to just hard operational muscle.
Exactly. And to understand the future, we have to start with the baseline today. And then we can introduce the new categories, which are all about catching those precursors. The FAA is building a framework that's designed to catch problems way, way upstream.
Okay, so what's that established traditional baseline that everyone starts with now?
The current baseline is defined under Part 107. Specifically, it's 14 CFR Section 107.9. And this is the traditional reactive threshold. Something bad happens, then you report.
Right.
Reporting is required within a pretty tight window, just 10 days, if the event involves serious injury or an actual loss of consciousness. Or, and this is the measurable one property damage that goes over $500.
$500.
And here's the crucial detail that people often miss. That $500 damage threshold excludes the drone itself.
So wait, if my $50,000 aircraft is completely destroyed, but it lands in an empty field, doesn't hit a mailbox or a person.
Yeah.
Technically, under Part 107, I don't have to file a formal accident report with the FAA.
That is absolutely correct. The threshold is purely focused on third-party damage or injury. It's a very high bar, and it's purely reactive. That $500 10-day cadence is the anchor everyone uses right now.
But that's totally insufficient for BVLOS.
Completely. The focus has to shift to the things that almost became that high bar consequence.
And that's where these two new critical terms come in: incident and near miss. How do those two differ, in the context of system safety?
Okay, so in the DVLOS context, an incident is an operational event where your safety margins were significantly reduced. And some kind of intervention, maybe it was automated by the aircraft, maybe it was the human pilot, or even just sheer luck, prevented a worse outcome. It's the event that caused you to, say, make an unscheduled landing.
So an incident is measurable. It often involves an immediate response. But the near miss, that's what everyone calls the SMS gold.
It is the gold, yes. A near miss is a critical SMS category. It's a credible almost accident. It's where that hazardous chain of events advanced far enough that your defenses were actively tested, even if the flight plan was, completed successfully.
So this data is valuable because it shows up before the property damage.
Before the property damage, before the injury, and definitely before the lawsuit. It is your earliest indicator that your system has flaws.
And this has to be logged even if, to the human eye, the flight looked absolutely perfect.
Precisely. If your geofence system had to stop the aircraft from drifting out of bounds, but the crew never even noticed that subtle drift, that's a near miss. It means your automated defenses were tested, and you learned something invaluable about the margin of error in that specific environment.
So the proposed Part 108 framework is basically building a regulatory structure to capture these precursors, not just the crashes.
Yes, the FAA is making it mandatory to report not just the accident, but the things that lead up to it.
Okay, let's dissect the 4 structured reports they're proposing, the ones that really force operators to lean into those weak signals.
First up, we have the interruption report. That's under the proposed 108.45C. This is designed as a monthly summary. It focuses purely on operational outcomes that were unplanned or non-standard.
Like what?
Things like unplanned or precautionary landings, or, when the planned flight route is altered because of known or suspected mechanical difficulties.
Okay, a monthly summary. Why a summary? Why not an immediate report for an interruption?
Because the interruption report tracks what happened operationally, not necessarily the severity of the cause. So if you execute a safe precautionary landing because the wind changed faster than you expected, that's an interruption, a deviation. By collecting this data monthly, the FAA gets this long-term view of operational readiness and mission success rates, but without demanding an emergency report for what was a safe, managed deviation.
Okay, that makes sense. So that handles the operational outcome. If I land early but safely, it goes on the monthly summary. Now, what about diagnosing why I had to land early?
That is a separate and much more technical filing. That's the Service Difficulty Report under Section 108.45 DMG. This is a structured record. It's focused specifically on diagnosis and technical failure. It captures failures, malfunctions, defects, and it requires you to detail the date, the specific aircraft ID, the part or system involved, the apparent cause, and critically, the corrective actions taken.
So this is about preventing repeat failures, not just in my fleet, but across the whole industry.
Exactly.
So that distinction is absolutely key for anyone listening. Interruption tracks the operational outcome. Service difficulty tracks the why, the technical diagnosis, and the fix. You might file one interruption report for the unscheduled landing, but that event could trigger 5 service difficulty reports if 5 different components were involved.
That's the beauty of separating them, you see. Next, we have to acknowledge that modern BVLOS systems they're part of a massive digital ecosystem. Safety isn't just about metal fatigue anymore. It's about data integrity.
Which brings us to the security occurrence.
Yes, Section 108.45E. This requires reporting events like unauthorized access to your networks, your mission planning devices, or any potential vulnerabilities that could affect the operational integrity of the flight.
So if my pilot's planning laptop gets a sophisticated phishing attempt, and that might have compromised the geodata for the mission, that's a mandatory report, even if the attempt failed.
Absolutely. The FAA views cyber risk as a direct flight safety risk. If the integrity of your flight control chain is compromised, that drone is fundamentally unsafe. The vulnerability itself has to be reported, not just the crash that might result from it later.
And finally, a category that really speaks to the scalable nature of BVLOS, the ADSP failure.
Yes. ADSP, Automated Data Service Provider. This is probably the most futuristic part of Part 108. Think of the ADSP as the central air traffic control brain for the whole swarm of drones. This service is what's going to support scalable BVLOS safe separation, strategic deconfliction, and all these other complex safety functions.
But if the ADSP fails, does the operator have to report an infrastructure failure that they don't even control? What's the limit of the operator's liability there?
That's a critical legal and operational question. Look, the operator doesn't control the ADSP infrastructure itself, that's true, but they rely on its service to maintain separation standards. So if the ADSP malfunctions and the drone loses access to real-time conflict data, the operator's safety margin just evaporates instantly. The FAA has to know, because safe separation is no longer just on the pilot, it's on this integrated computational system. If that auto data fails, the entire BVLOS ecosystem is degraded.
That sounds like a massive amount of paperwork.
Yeah.
And the time frames, they're so structured, operators are going to have to internalize a pretty complex submission cadence, right?
They will. And the FAA has designed the rhythm to match the urgency of the threat. The shortest window is for the fastest moving threats. Security occurrences have to be reported within 96 hours.
Just 4 days.
4 days. That really highlights how critical a compromised digital boundary is.
That's fast. What about a hardware failure? Something that needs an engineer to diagnose and write a full report. What's the allowance there?
The technical reports, the service difficulty reports, they're required within 7 days. That gives the operator a little time for initial diagnosis and corrective actions, with follow-up info required as the investigation moves forward. It's reasonable, but it still demands a very rapid internal root cause analysis.
Okay, and then for the big stuff.
Then, aligning with the old Part 107 structure, emergency deviations and high-consequence safety events, which includes that $500 property damage trigger, are still required within 10 days. That keeps the established baseline.
And the high-volume data, the summaries, those are monthly.
Right. That's the bulk of the structured data flow, the big picture stuff. You've got monthly submissions for basic flight data, aircraft registrations, serial numbers, and the monthly interruption summaries, if you had any, are due by the 10th day of the following month.
The pattern to internalize seems to be high-urgency cyber first, then short-window technical reports, and then the structured cadence for the monthly fleet performance summaries.
That's it.
The cost of compliance here feels significant. I mean, it's not just filling out a form. It's the massive back-end system you need to capture all this data and process it fast enough.
And that is the core business insight. Part 108 shifts the regulatory burden from physical inspections to data auditability. You're spending money on rigorous internal data systems now to avoid the exponentially higher cost of an accident, a lawsuit, or getting permanently grounded by the FAA later.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. This new regulation isn't just about forms and deadlines. It's fundamentally about culture. We're moving from a visual-first safety mindset, where you react to what you physically see, to a data-first mindset, where you react to what the logs are inferring.
That change from visual to data, it feels fundamentally uncomfortable for a lot of pilots who are trained to keep their eyes on the aircraft. In BVLOS, the fundamental mindset shift is this. A near miss is often detected as a near breach of a safety margin, not as a thing you literally saw. You know it happened because your system logs show you were too close to a boundary or too close to losing control, even if the mission was a success.
And this cultural shift, this technical shift, it's all formalized by the requirement for a safety management system, an SMS. The FAA is proposing that all high-risk BVLOS operators have to develop a comprehensive SMS and training program.
The SMS is the blueprint for how you manage risk. Reporting is just the raw fuel for that system. It formalizes how risk is identified, managed, and verified. We often use the mnemonic SPA plus P to remember the core elements.
SPA plus P.
Safety policy, safety assurance, safety risk management, plus safety promotion. And your detailed Part 108 reporting system directly feeds that safety assurance element. It provides the hard data to identify hazards, to assess how effective your existing controls actually are, and to verify that your risk profile is still acceptable. Without comprehensive data-driven reporting, an SMS is just, it's just theory.
So how does the reporting actually flow within a proper SMS? I'm trying to visualize how the internal learning happens before the regulatory stuff even kicks in.
Think of it as the BVLOS reporting ladder, 3 concentric rings of escalating formality. The innermost ring is internal capture. This has to be fast, non-punitive, and focus purely on learning from anomalies, near misses, human factor slips. This data never leaves the company, but it's critical for proactive fixes.
So that's the data that stays inside the tent for learning and training.
Exactly. The middle ring is regulatory reporting. That's strictly threshold-driven. It responds to the specific triggers defined by Part 108 or 107. And finally, the outermost ring is public, insurance, and legal documentation, which only gets activated after a major event.
But isn't there a risk that operators generate just too much noise internally? Paralyzing their safety team with false positives if they over-collect. How do you manage that signal-to-noise ratio?
That is the core implementation challenge. The principle for elite operators is this. Your program should over-collect internally so you never underreport externally when a regulatory threshold is met. You mitigate the noise by having a really high-quality classification matrix, which we'll get to, and by ensuring your internal reports are quick, structured, and focused on the fix, not the blame. A good SMS processes that noise quickly to find the true signal.
That gets to the no-bury rule. You have to normalize finding problems. We hear that common misconception all the time, right? If nothing crashed, it's not worth reporting.
That mindset is an operational liability in BVLOS. In elite operations, a near miss isn't an embarrassment. It's treated as a future accident that volunteered early. You have to train your team to execute short, fast reporting that is blame-aware but not blame-led. It needs to be root cause-obsessed and fix-forward focused.
Why is that internal culture so incredibly difficult to maintain in practice? Why do people instinctively want to hide or downplay close calls?
It's the embarrassment trap. Near misses expose procedural flaws, configuration errors, even human slips, and operators often treat these exposures as embarrassing instead of valuable, and that leads to silent drift, where small, repeatable failures go unreported because someone doesn't want to get in trouble, until those small failures chain together into a catastrophic outcome.
So reporting a near miss, especially a human error, that's actually a mark of professionalism.
It is the single greatest mark of professionalism because it demonstrates you know where your system's boundaries truly are. It means you haven't caused a failure, you've prevented an accident.
I really like this idea you mentioned of the 60-second rule as a reflex that operators need to internalize.
It's a great heuristic. It forces proactive quantification of danger. If something feels a little unusual, the reflex question is, if this condition continued for 60 more seconds, what's the credible worst case? So you see a slight voltage fluctuation during a high wind maneuver. The 60-second rule forces you to ask, if this continues for 1 minute, will I be landing safely or will I be conducting an emergency high-risk drop? If the answer is loss of control or unauthorized airspace entry, you prevent underreporting by ensuring that marginal event gets logged and analyzed. It pressure tests the safety margin in real time.
Okay, so the culture's defined, the regulatory deadlines are set. Now we're at the core technical challenge.
Yeah.
BVLOS relies on layered systems automation, comms, ADSP, so small degradations can scale into major hazards so fast. We need to identify and, more importantly, measure the specific safety margins that were squeezed.
We have to move past these vague feelings of risk and define the invisible walls that separate success from disaster. And you have to accept that a near miss is rarely a single failure. It's more like a family of margin squeezes. We've broken this down into 7 critical safety margin categories.
Okay, what's first?
Starting with the most intuitive, airspace and traffic proximity. This covers any deviation from the planned corridor, any detect and avoid or DAA, alerts from other aircraft, or any loss of strategic deconfliction. If you get within a boundary you defined, that's a squeeze.
Makes sense.
Second, ground risk. This is defined by metrics like altitude margin shrinking over obstacles, or route drift over populated areas, or any situation that leads to an emergency descent or an unplanned landing risk.
The third category feels like it governs everything in remote environments. Communication.
That's command and control. C2. You have to track the health of your link. This means monitoring for link quality degradation, latency spikes, packet loss patterns, or partial loss link events. We call these LOCC, loss of command control events. The stability of your link is your primary safety margin.
Okay, and fourth.
Fourth is a measure of trust in your own position, navigation integrity. This involves tracking GNSS quality drops, unexpected drift, sensor disagreement, or spikes in position uncertainty metrics.
Wait, you mentioned HDOP and VDOP spikes. For the listener who's maybe more on the business side and not buried in drone logs every day, can you anchor those for us?
Of course. HDOP is horizontal dilution of precision, and VDOP is vertical. They're invisible measurements your GPS receiver is constantly calculating. They basically tell you the confidence level of your position. Think of it as the size of the air bubble around your drone. If your HDOP suddenly spikes, it means your horizontal position is momentarily highly uncertain. And if your position is uncertain, your safety margin shrinks instantly because your geofence boundaries are only as good as your position accuracy.
Got it. What's fifth?
Fifth, energy and propulsion, the physical health of the aircraft, battery reserve erosion, voltage sag under load, motor anomalies, vibration spikes that indicate fatigue. Sixth, autonomy and software. This includes any mode confusion, unintended fail-safe triggers, like an unplanned RTH return to home, or any anomaly in executing the flight plan. And here's the critical lesson. If the aircraft had to save the mission from your plan, that is automatically a near-miss candidate.
And finally, the modern threat.
Cyber and data integrity. Unauthorized access attempts, risks of mission file tampering, suspicious telemetry patterns. Given Part 108, this is a non-negotiable focus.
So since we have no visual reference, how do we actually detect these 7 margin squeezes? The focus shifts entirely to system logs and automated monitoring. What does that detection stack look like?
It's all about creating instrumentation for your invisible walls. The most obvious evidence comes from real-time safety monitors. These are the software checks running constantly. If you get a geofence proximity alert, a minimum altitude violation, or a fail-safe activation, those are immediate near-miss triggers. They are proof that your safety system had to step in.
The alert itself is the proof. Where else does the forensic evidence live?
It lives in the aircraft health logs. You have to pull data on motor temperature spikes, battery voltage sag below your planned reserve, intermittent sensor faults, hard fault codes. A precautionary landing is an incident you handled well, but the log evidence explaining why you landed is the source material for that service difficulty report.
And for BVLOS, the C2 link data must be critical.
Heavily. We rely on C2 link performance data. Look for drops in signal strength, rising latency, packet loss. You don't need to see the link fail. The link metrics tell the story of how close you came to a total loss of command.
And for navigation.
You pull the navigation integrity signals, look for those GNSS accuracy flags or disagreement between the IMU and GPS, or autopilot smoothing that shows the aircraft drifted right up to a boundary before it was corrected.
You also mentioned external data sources. Why are those so critical for traffic preparation?
Because in BVLOS, your system can detect a conflict even when a human can't see the other aircraft. Your system is constantly merging data from remote ID, from UTM traffic feeds, or ADS-BN signals. When that data shows proximity tightened and met your alert threshold, that is a traffic separation near miss that you inferred computationally.
So post-flight analytics are the silent heroes here.
Yep.
You're running automated scans to catch patterns that the crew might have completely missed in real time.
Exactly. Elite BVLOS programs expect to find near misses after the flight. Automated analysis answers the critical question. We didn't notice, but the data says we got lucky. It catches micro patterns that, if allowed to repeat, reliably predict a major failure down the line.
Okay, now that we know what to look for, all those margin squeezes, how do elite operators process this massive flood of data efficiently? Because if this is all manual log review, it feels like immediate paperwork paralysis.
It would be. The solution involves 3 integrated tools. They turn the philosophy of safety into a repeatable, auditable process.
Tool number 1.
The first tool is the near-miss classification matrix. Its whole purpose is to consistently answer the question, is this a near miss, a reportable incident, or just expected operational noise?
And the key to making it repeatable is that 2-axis severity logic. This replaces the subjective, did I feel nervous, with a measurable grid.
Yes, you plot the event on 2 simple axes. Axis 1 is the margin threat level. Green for normal, amber when you enter a safety buffer, or red when a protective system had to intervene. Axis 2 is consequence potential. Low, which is just a nuisance. Medium, which could cause an unauthorized incursion or a forced landing. Or high, a credible path to a collision or serious damage.
That's interesting. So how does a low threat and amber event become a high consequence event?
If the location is hypersensitive, for example, an amber-level link degradation, the link is degraded but still functional, occurs when the drone is flying directly over a chemical plant. The threat level was amber, but the consequence potential, if that link was lost, is high. That event has to be prioritized for immediate analysis, far above a red-level threat over an empty field.
So what's the non-negotiable decision rule? When must an event be recorded as a formal near miss?
The rule box has to be crystal clear in your SOP. A BVLOS near miss is recorded when an amber or red buffer is entered, when autopilot or crew intervention was required, or when a repeatable failure trend appears.
And the pitfall here is absolutely critical. If you don't define those buffers beforehand, your minimum link threshold, your corridor with your classification will just be inconsistent and subjective.
And useless for an audit. Which brings us to tool 2, the log review SOP. The standard operating procedure. This is the repeatable process to detect margin squeezes that were not visually observed. It prevents selective reporting.
What about the team component? Who performs this review and when? If the pilot has to log every metric after every flight, they'll burn out.
The SOP must define roles. Ideally, the pilot does a quick subjective debrief immediately post-flight. Did anything feel off? But the deep forensic log review has to be done by a designated safety reviewer, not the tired human who just flew the mission. And the SOP must start with a complete data sources checklist. Flight telemetry, autopilot event log, C2 link log. It ensures all layers are checked every time.
And how do we teach the thresholds for these reviewers without just giving them arbitrary numbers? This is where the 3-band method comes in.
Right. We teach the method, not just the numbers. For every single metric, you define 3 functional bands that translate directly into action. Band A is normal, expected noise, no action needed. Band B is caution. You've entered a safety buffer, tag it as a near-miss candidate and investigate. Band C is near-miss. A protective action was required, an immediate formal classification.
Give me a real-world example of Band B versus Band C for, say, energy reserve.
Okay, for battery reserve. Band A is ending with 35% capacity left, as planned. Band B, caution, is ending with 24% capacity when your minimum safe buffer is 25%. You finish the mission, but you burn through your safety margin. That requires a report on your planning. Band C, near miss, would be the battery voltage dropping so low that the autopilot initiated an immediate, non-cancelable emergency landing. That system intervention defines it as an immediate near miss.
And the biggest warning when doing this log review.
Watch out for two things. First, single point blame. Failures are usually chained causes. Narrate the whole chain. Second, never ignore micro patterns. 3 small Band B alerts across 3 separate flights can be infinitely worse than one big, obvious Band C alert.
Okay, that brings us to tool 3, the scriptable post-flight checklist. This is where the abstract logic is forced to become actionable.
It has to be structured. The data is pulled, analyzed against the 3 bands, and then filtered through an automated, standardized if-then logic. For example, if caution band entered, then tag near-miss candidate and require reviewer notes. Or if a repeat alert happens in the same geographic area across 2 or more flights, then open a mandatory route hazard revision action.
The if-then logic removes the subjectivity.
And the action output has to be mandatory. The checklist has to trigger change. It must end with a clear classification anomaly, near miss, or incident, and a required action. A checklist that doesn't cause change is just performance theater.
That is a fantastic framework. Let's run through a few specific, realistic scenarios to see how this works in practice. We'll ask, which safety margin got squeezed? And what's the proof in the logs?
Let's do it. We'll use that mental model. What margin was threatened? Did a protective behavior trigger? What was the credible worst case?
Okay, case 1, the link cliff you didn't see. Routine power line patrol in heavy rolling terrain. Operator thinks everything is fine.
But the hidden log signature shows clustered latency spikes and elevated packet loss over a predictable valley segment where terrain was blocking the radio. And crucially, the autopilot momentarily shifts to a conservative control mode to wait for the signal to come back. The pilot never even noticed.
The squeeze is C2 link integrity. Worst case.
Full loss of command and control, a LOCC event, leading to an emergency hover right over the power line, or worse, an uncontrolled descent into that valley. Classification is a C2 near miss. The proof is the latency spike crossing the Band B threshold and the corresponding protective action by the autopilot.
Action.
Widen the comm buffer for that geographic segment. Raise the corridor altitude to clear the terrain and add a designated alternate hold point right before entering that valley.
Okay, case 2, the invisible GFN squeeze. Drone tracks normally on the map, near controlled airspace. Pilot thinks they're safe.
Hidden log signature. The logs show a GNSS integrity warning was triggered. The cross-track error slowly grows toward the restricted boundary until the autopilot correction kicks in and pushes the drone back to the center line.
So the margin squeezed is both airspace boundary and navigation integrity.
Exactly. Classification is an airspace buffer near miss. The system had to rescue navigation truth before a regulatory violation occurred. The mastery lesson here is near miss does not equal violation. It means we almost needed the violation report.
The action is to expand the buffer and add a GNSS quality gating rule before entering that segment.
Perfect.
Case 3, the battery reality check. Cold morning flight, mission finished, but with less reserve than policy allows.
The hidden log signature shows voltage sag grew rapidly under wind load. The end of mission reserve dips below your internal minimum buffer of, say, 25%, landing at 22%.
Margin squeezed. Energy reserve. This is a planning near miss.
It is classification. Energy reserve near miss. The planning assumptions almost failed. The action is a new cold weather reserve rule, shorter grids, and an updated power model.
Case 4, the precautionary landing. Operator sees a growing vibration, land safely, no crash.
The logs show elevated motor current and temperature trending toward a risk threshold. Vibration analysis confirms a frequency anomaly. No hard failure, but clear trend data.
So it's a propulsion near miss, safely managed. This feeds both the interruption report and the service difficulty report under Part 108.
Right. Action is immediate component replacement and raising the trigger sensitivity for that motor class in your health monitor. This case proves that good judgment works.
Case 5, the DAA alert with no visual. The detect and avoid system issues an alert near a known route, then it clears. Operator sees nothing.
The hidden log signature from ADS-B in data shows proximity geometry briefly tightened, triggering your alert threshold.
Margin squeezed. Traffic separation.
It's a traffic separation near miss candidate by default. The sensor is your eyes in BVLOS. You have to trust it. The action is to review traffic patterns, maybe adjust routing times, and introduce traffic hot zone buffers.
And case 6, cyber intrusion attempt. No visible flight effects. Mission was fine.
But IT logs show suspicious access attempts on the ground control device post-flight.
The squeeze is the cyber boundary.
Classification is a security occurrence candidate near miss BVLOS relies on trustworthy data. The action is an immediate credential reset and device hardening. By the time a cyber attack is visible in flight, you're already late.
That's a phenomenal deep dive into the operational shift. Let's pull back now and look at the bigger picture. The U.S. is building this massive BVLOS ecosystem with Part 108, but we can look internationally, specifically to Canada, for some proven models.
It's always smart to look abroad. Canada has been running a highly structured BVLOS program for some time. Their system, particularly the Level 1 complex framework, is a great low-risk BVLOS on-ramp.
How is that Canadian model structured differently?
Canada's Level 1 complex is deliberately a tight safety funnel. Operations are highly bounded. They have to be in uncontrolled airspace, below 400 feet, and within strict distance limits from aerodromes. The philosophy is methodical competence building. The U.S. Part 108 proposal, by contrast, is a broader ecosystem build designed for ultimate scale. It features that two-tier authorization permits for lower risk, certificates for higher risk, with the higher tier mandating the full SMS.
So Canada focused on building confidence in a small sandbox first, while the U.S. is building the whole stadium at once, but requiring robust safety systems for the big players.
Exactly. But the underlying objective is shared. Both systems emphasize that near misses are critical system signals, detected exclusively through logs, not through visual observation.
So what are the key pieces of DNA the U.S. can benefit from to make this safety implementation more practical under Part 108?
There are 4 key lessons. First, the low-risk starter lane. Canada's bounded model makes that first BVLOS step simple and repeatable. It's easier to build audited competence. Second, their use of population density definitions. Canada uses specific density-based definitions, like less than 5 people per square kilometer in a flight corridor. This creates a standardized, shared way to grade risk.
Why is a density metric superior for grading risk in BVLOS?
Because BVLOS risk is inherently tied to the probability of hitting a person. A density metric provides a measurable, objective way to categorize risk profiles consistently. It makes your consequential analysis the what if it fell here question cleaner and auditable.
Okay, what's third?
Third is process-first discipline. Canada's system ties operation to declared system capabilities. It forces declaration-based thinking. If you declare your link loss recovery time as 5 seconds and your logs show 8 seconds, you have a non-compliance event that has to be fixed. And finally, the cultural bedrock, a non-punitive culture. Transport Canada guidance explicitly promotes reporting, even for minor events. The U.S. has to ensure operators feel safe reporting small problems, or those problems will just grow in the dark until they cause a disaster.
So, to bring this all home for the listener who's building a BVLOS program, let's recap the final professionalism habits that turn a compliance team into an elite, high-reliability ops team.
First, remember the compound rule. Near misses are rarely from a single cause. Always look for the chain of events. Narrate the full chain. Don't hunt for a single smoking gun. Second, use the clean heuristic. Protective system activation is an automatic near-miss trigger. If RTH, a hold, or an emergency descent is invoked, you log it immediately as a Band C event.
And internal standards have to be stricter than regulatory ones.
Always. Practice internal strictness. Your internal near-miss buffers must always be tighter, more conservative than the external thresholds. That's the hallmark of a mature industry. And finally, adopt the investigator mindset. Teach your teams to label the root cause by category. Was this a planning near miss, an execution near miss, a system near miss? This focuses everyone on the fix, not on personal blame.
So what does this all mean? The operational shift for BVLOS is it's undeniable. Safety is about defining and defending invisible margins, not just avoiding obstacles you can see. Part 108 and the SMS connection make this kind of data-driven learning mandatory.
The key takeaway is that internal near misses are mandatory fuel for your SMS health. Part 108 mandates structured external reporting for the critical precursors interruptions, service difficulty, ADSP failures, security occurrences. The SMS is the engine that turns those dry reports into verifiable, life-saving risk control improvements.
That is a comprehensive breakdown of an incredibly complex but essential regulatory framework. It gives operators the philosophical, cultural, and technical roadmap they need.
You know, if the most dangerous phrase a BVLOS operator can say is, "nothing happened," then I want to challenge you, the listener. What proactive step will you take this week to make what almost happened visible to your team? Be the kind of operator who makes invisible risk visible early. Define your own 3-band thresholds for your unique operation and start logging those small signals today. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above. Go beyond. Get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.